Dear colleagues, good morning in Europe, good afternoon in Asia, good evening, Australia. And for our guests who joined us from Latin America, it's still in the middle of the night. My name is Castelos Kolo, and I welcome you all as IMMAA's president on behalf of its board to this second day of this year's IMMAA Topical Forum. The International Media Management Academic Association, we always try to connect academic reasoning with contemporary challenges in industry practice. We try to do this beyond specific countries, but taking into account the diversity of national contexts. We will understand again today what this can mean after a great first day with an emphasis on Latin America and Spain. Communicating to you from Munich in Germany, we had devised this year's topical forum into a Western Hemisphere session that took place yesterday, Western Hemisphere from a Eurocentric perspective, and on an Eastern Hemisphere session today for the next approximately 1.5 hours. Most probably not all of you today could participate in yesterday's session. However, with the consent of the speakers, we will enable asynchronous viewing on the IMMAA's website. Give us a few days to make that possible. So this second topical forum, this year's topical forum continues last year's theme, media management in post-pandemic times. Unfortunately, this question mark in post-pandemic is more justified than ever. At least in some regions in Europe, we reach unseen levels of COVID-19, still rising day after day. So we will see how we're gonna get through the winter. In our forum, as yesterday, we will ask also today, what of the experienced effects during the COVID-19 pandemic will remain? What are the learnings that stay relevant? It's my pleasure and honor now to announce again a fantastic lineup of scholars from IMMAA's Scientific Advisory Committee. We will change the order a little bit because of the challenges some of our guests have. We will start with Toshiya Jitsuzumi from Tokyo in Japan. We will then continue with Reinhard Kunz from Germany. And then we see whenever Terry flew from Australia and Elena Vartanova from Russia will join us, how we fit them into the lineup. This session will be moderated by my dear board colleague, Uwe Eisenbeis. I see Terry now and Elena. Very good. So we are complete. Great, great. Yeah, it's a challenge because we decided that we want you simultaneously online and not one after the other. That's why we opted for this platform. And we have a limitation of 5 being backstage and on stage. So as soon as I leave the stage, you will be complete with Uwe and Reinhard. So I hand over now to my dear colleague, Uwe Eisenbeis, colleague on the board of IMMAA from Germany. And let's enjoy now more of the different perspectives on the forum's theme. The floor is yours, Uwe, and guest speakers. We start with Toshiya Jitsuzumi, and I leave the stage now.
Thank you for giving me this precious opportunity, and it's my great honor to share the status quo of the Japanese media market under the pandemic with this distinguished group. So as there seems to be no other Japanese in the team, I would like to start my presentation by introducing some figures of the Japanese media markets. First of all, I have to say that Japan is a country where terrestrial TVs are universally available and still popular. Even in the most remote area, people can enjoy at least 3 terrestrial channels. One is from commercial firms and the other 2 are from the public corporations. And because 60% of the country is mountainous and there are many high-rise buildings in densely populated areas, even the terrestrial TVs covers all the nation, more than half of the household watch the program via cable systems. And the satellite TV is also universally available throughout Japan. And also Internet TV gets popularity in niche market. Of course, foreign giants such as Netflix and Amazon are also entering the market. Together, they offer a wide variety of programs right now for the Japanese people. But among these terrestrial TVs, among these, the terrestrial TVs are the one with the largest commercial scale in Japan. Oops. The left side graph shows that the commercial TVs are still occupying more than half of the TV revenues, and most of which come from the commercial sales. Revenues for the public TVs, which account for 17% of total, are derived from subscription fees. This is a fee that must be paid by households that have a video screen capable of receiving NHK programs. NHK is the name of the public broadcasting organization in Japan. Since individual households are obliged to pay this fee even if they do not actually watch the program, it is considered as if it's a tax, and there are many arguments against this system itself. The figure on the right shows that in terms of advertising market, the internet share has increased 2.5 times in response to broadband penetration during this period, while terrestrial TV has lost only minor part of its share and still remains a huge part of the market in 2019. Actually, in 2019, share of terrestrial TV is only 5 percentage points smaller than the share accounted for by the internet media. As a conclusion, I can say that in Japan, where broadband penetration is among the highest in the world, terrestrial TVs still have an economic power that rivals that of the internet, at least in the advertising market. Now let's turn to the impact of COVID-19 in Japan. The photo on the left shows that what it looks like in front of Shinjuku Station last year under the declared state of emergency. If you have ever been to Japan, you know that this is a place where usually very much crowded. The photo on the right shows the university where I work. This is a place where lots of students and teachers and professors usually come and go. During the emergency, because all of the classes were moved online, I didn't see any student in this venue. This graph shows the impact of COVID-19 on consumer behaviors in Japan. The upper one indicates the change in the week average of media contact time, showing that the time spent on TV and radio is increasing, which is possibly due to the stay-at-home lifestyle. But it is also clear that the growth of the time for the internet is far larger than that. Bottom one indicates that under the COVID-19, media contact rates increased almost throughout the day in Japan. A closer look shows that the peak viewing time for TV has moved slightly earlier, peaking before 9 p.m. On the other hand, internet and online video use peaks at 10 p.m. This suggests a life pattern of watching TV after dinner and watching online video before bedtime. And this diagram shows the change in internet usage among Japanese people. Week average usage time, both inside and outside the home, are described by the size of the tiles for each internet device used. The area circled in red represents the share of watching online video. The amount of time spent per week increased by 44% from 94 minutes in 2019 to 136 minutes in 2020. On the other hand, the time spent watching internet video increased by 80% from 18 to 32 minutes during the same period. As you know, that net video especially high definition one, consumes much more traffic compared to other internet usage. This is why download traffic in Japan has increased by 57% in the year starting May 2019. Considering that there was a steady 17% increase in previous years, the increase in 2020 is at a level that can be called explosive. The increase from 2020 to 2021 has also remained high compared to the pre-pandemic levels, indicating that continuation of online video viewing among Japanese households. On the other hand, despite the increasing use of interactive video conference in business and education, there seems no noticeable changes in uploads. These lines show the changes in individual viewership of terrestrial TVs by time of day. The absolute rating levels vary depending on whether it is in prime time, golden time, or not, so the lines shown here are drawn using the 2019 figures as a benchmark. Probably due to the stay-at-home lifestyle, viewership increased in the first quarter of 2020. But soon after, the rating has returned to pre-pandemic levels and start following a long-term downward trend. This means that the impact of COVID-19 on terrestrial TV in Japan was just transitory. On the other hand, as economic activity stagnated due to pandemic, the situation for advertising revenue was dire in 2020. The graphs on the left show the change in revenue for each station, while the graphs on the right show the monthly revenue for NTV, which is a Nippon Television, and the TBS, which is a Tokyo Broadcasting System, as a percentage of the previous years. Considering the possibility of a recovery due to revival of economic activity in 2021, the extent to which the financial situation of the Japanese broadcasters has been damaged by COVID-19 will need to be carefully examined in future by using some empirical data. By the way, internet video viewing is steadily advancing, albeit at a low level compared to terrestrial TV, which has a far longer history in the Japanese market. The top left shows the possibility that the impact of stay-at-home lifestyle due to COVID-19 accelerated the rate of diffusion in 2020 and 2021. And the bottom left and the right-hand graphs indicate that the increasing number of internet video users are gravitating towards Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. There is no doubt that the giant content platforms from the US is gaining control of the Japanese SVOD market. Well, it has long been pointed out by many experts in Japan that it will become more and more difficult for Japanese companies to compete in the VOD market with major US companies because US companies invest huge amount of money in content creation. I think because it is true that COVID-19 has accelerated the trend of going online, the development of this expected doomsday scenario for Japanese firms may have been accelerated at least by a few years. These two graphs are based on a customer survey conducted by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, which is in charge of media industry and telecom industries. The graphs on the left show that during the first emergency declaration in April 2020, 40% of users watched online videos, and during the second declaration in January 2021, the number dropped to 27%. The graph on the right shows future usage intention, where it drops even further to 22%, indicating that part of the increase in internet video viewing in Japan due to COVID-19 is a temporary phenomenon. Here is a summary of what I have found so far. The remaining question is, of course, whether the Japanese media market will follow the same path as overseas market, where OTT videos become a true competitor to the terrestrial TVs and becoming a king of the ecosystem, or Japan can hold her conventional position where terrestrial TVs remain at the core of media ecosystem. Unfortunately, I do not have an answer yet. However, even if TV continues to be at the center of the ecosystem in the near future, given the rise of online media in the advertising market, it is unlikely that their business model, which is based on the commercial revenue, will remain intact. Therefore, regardless of the answer to the previous question I made, I think it is highly likely that the Japanese TV station will have completely different business model 10 years from now, or 5 years from now. Finally, the only thing I can say for sure is that regardless of the fate of the Japanese media market or the Japanese broadcasters, the content business will continue to expand into the global market. Thank you for your attention. I'm stopped here.
Elena's presentation is to business models of media companies in liquid and uncertain times.
So please take my great thanks for this event and for the invitation to come. And I would be happy to deal with this new reality, which we call pandemic, post-pandemic, or pandemic, or kind of eternally pandemic. However, we have already seen the approaches of many scholars to define the times in which we live, kind of post-modernity times. And Zygmunt Baum once called it liquid times, which then was very broadly used by Mark Dörse. Liquidity and uncertainty became even greater when we moved to this pandemic and ongoing pandemic times. This is also followed and supported by the digital transformation, which is driven not only by this liquidity, but also by a lot of changes in the society. The driver of this, all these changes is, of course, digitalization process. However, digitalization being a broad social change also influences media, and also media, telecommunications, computers, and I would say information and communication sphere, field, using Bourdieu terms as such. So we may say that transformation is extremely rapid and powerful in the at the crossroads where media environment, audience behavior, and technologies meet each other. What should be important to say that we are also moving from traditional business models, which has been established first in the early newspaper times when the audience-based subscription or retail or circulation retail model has been developed. The 20th century, with the rise of advertising and subsequently the creation of advertising business model, became, of course, a dominant both for commercial and even public service or state media, depending the national contexts where these different models have been placed. And of course, we have to say that the most important driver in all this became the audience. Audience development influenced in the age of the 20th and 21st century. Audience development influenced restructuring media system, and we are growingly using term traditional or legacy media to identify the old segment, which used to have these old business models like audience-based, or like subscription-based or advertising-based models. However, the technology, driving technology, and also technology required by the audience created a big segment which is somehow integrated with the legacy media, or somehow which is opposed to legacy media. And that we call social media or social networks, with a new communication environment, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, increased interactions from the audience, and increased impact of these new professionals who have never been included in the legacy media environment, into the traditional newsroom environment, but who are challenging, for example, traditional media in terms of advertising flows. Digitalization led to multiple screens, mobility of media use, and growing shift to digital and online. And this also was reflected in the change of a demand for different type of content. Studying the powerful which previously have been satisfied by legacy media. Of course, this is absolutely true for all countries. And we can say that in parallel with the global, in a way, with the global change in the global marketplace, we still have very important national environments to combine, to integrate global and national trends. Traditionally, Russian media industry is living in this liquidity and uncertainty the last 30 years, since the fall of the Soviet Union, since the fall of the empire, and since the technological revolution has become the second driver for the dual change in the Russian media system. As a result of the shift to new economic structures, the advertising-based business model has become a dominant. Though Russian media still is keeping a lot of state ownership in the media area. And this state ownership, which is relevant both to large media companies based in Moscow, the center or capital of the country, and in regional geographic areas. Also, the local state agencies are using its ownership to be present at the media market. So in these difficult conditions, still, we have the growing role of new media, internet, and social media as an alternative to traditional structures. Nevertheless, the terrestrial television, which is successfully digitalized, and the digital switchover has been finished 2 years before, even 3 years before, television still keeping the key role. But in terms of different generations, we may say that television, federal, terrestrial, though digital, television is watched more by elder generations, by younger generations, is out of this digital television sphere for the social media. Also, we may say that media system is still very geographically very hierarchical, because the major companies in Russia are still located in big cities and in big cities and in big agglomerations. Digital audience, nevertheless, is becoming more and more powerful, dictating traditional media shift to the new media environment. The country is very controversial in terms of digital consequences in the media field, because still digital divide remains a problem for many Russians. This is mostly generational, gender, and I would say ethnical situation, because different small ethnicities, ethnic groups live in far north or in a very difficult climatic areas, and this bring a difficult consequence of difficult connection to the internet. And of course, there are two important trends which still, in these times of uncertainties, prevents the complete digitalization and building the digital capital for the Russian nation as such and for all users. Because, first of all, people are not yet ready to pay for digital content, though pandemic times had made a lot of shifts, and at least 5 OTT cinemas, 5 streaming video services became very strong, but still not financially, though in terms of population use. And also information piracy is the second factor to prevent the growing digitalization in terms of industry. What I would like to say, it is clear that we are here today in a very, I would say, problematic and very promising at the same time moment. We are witnessing all over the world in all countries how traditional models based on advertising are collapsing. And of course, this mass advertising on mass national TV channels is no more a recipe for financial success. And models are changing, switching. Advertising business model is switching to the digital environment, providing us with a lot of smaller options, which are more user targeted, which are more audience, narrow audience concentrated, but still not bringing that much advertising cash flow as in our industrial 20th century. Here I have the number of models which are emerging in small or in small media companies, also in Russia, and also in digital platforms which are growingly emerging in the country. However, free content model, ad-free model, personalized advertising, editorials, product placement, special projects, related businesses, these all are in a way supporting each other. They are an attempt to substitute the losing and the minimizing advertising flows, but they are still not possible to complement the flows which existed previously. On the other hand, we are still witnessing the existence and, in a way, the rise of digital subscription models, which are repeating the whole logic of the audience ready to pay for the media content, but in a new digital environment. And of course, the impact of the digital subscription on-demand model, unique experience model, the impact is growing, is coming more and more important, but still not enough to support the media companies. I have 2 more slides just to finalize that this liquidity and uncertainty, the need for combination of models or hybridization of models is becoming a third trend at the market. Crowdfunding also responds from the audience, but on a more voluntary way. Cross-device targeting, freemium strategies, these are different types of hybrids. And of course, these hybrids are reflected in the paywalls, which might be considered as traditional subscription, but which might be maybe more considered as a variations or nuanciations of subscription models. Digital platforms, dangerous or supportive for the media business? This is still the question. Digital platforms during the pandemic year realized that direct to consumer model, kind of serving the single watcher or the household watching, is also a new rising model, which proves the importance of the audience again. Finalizing, I would say that uncertainty and liquidity gives us no chance to make clear predictions. What we need to do is just to, I would say, to classify, to observe, to systematize the emerging tools and models. And this would be perhaps the most important conclusion of these times of uncertainty and liquidity.
Thank you, Elena. Very interesting to see that the business models and especially the revenue models become more and more complex, and there's more and more greater differentiation between the different revenue models. So now I managed it to enter the stage. Very warm welcome from my side, and I have to say sorry for all these technical problems. First, I was not able to enter the stage. Now Castelos is not. This is kind of pandemic times, but let us continue with our program. So I will hand over to Reinhard.
All right.
And Reinhard will be the next.
Okay.
He's professor for media and technology management, and he will talk on effects of content type and COVID-19 context on consumer engagement. And there's a presentation. Great. Thank you very much, and welcome, Reinhard. Hello.
Hi, Uwe. Thank you very much for your introduction. Great being together with you today. Yes, I'm presenting a study on customer engagement today, and together with Sina Wenzel and Nicolas Claire from my team, I conducted a quantitative content analysis of media and technology companies' social media posts. And we were especially interested in the effects of both content type and the COVID-19 context on customer engagement. And yeah, when we studied the literature, we found out that there were several papers that have already investigated the impact of content marketing strategies on customer engagement. And yeah, for example, the effect of the content type. And previous studies, they focused on product-oriented industries. And for this reason, further research was required that examines the relationship between content type and customer engagement within a service-oriented environment. And yeah, the media industry is actually increasingly characterized by a service orientation. And moreover, we found out that context-related factors can have an effect on customer engagement as well. And the current example that we are investigating within this conference at the moment is COVID-19 pandemic, and we consider this to be a relevant contextual factor that has or might have an impact on customer engagement. For companies, COVID-19 poses definitely significant challenges. So lockdowns have caused major disruption to companies' operations, and in order to meet these challenges, professional crisis management and communication strategies are needed. So companies have increased their usage of social media to contact with their to get in contact with their customers during the pandemic, but we could not find actual guidelines that would describe how companies should communicate via social media during the pandemic and other pandemic crises in the future. So especially for media companies, such insights would be important as they have a certain responsibility and they need implications of this pandemic and the underlying infodemic. So our research objectives were to examine the effects of content and context-related factors on customer engagement within the media and technology industry. And we wanted to develop crisis-related guidelines that would describe how social media posts can be designed to better engage with customers. So our research question was, how do the content type of company-generated posts and the COVID-19 related context influence customer engagement? And in terms of the customer engagement concept, most of you are aware of this concept, have something in mind when engagement is mentioned, but there are various different definitions of the concept that emphasize different aspects of engagement. And we follow the understanding of Brody and Van Dorn, who highlight the behavioral aspects of this concept. So customer engagement can be defined as customers' behavioral manifestations that have a brand or firm focus beyond purchase, resulting from motivational drivers. And we were especially interested in the influencing factors that can be used for in order to influence customer engagement. So we considered the different antecedents, so content-related factors, especially the content, of course, that can be used to increase engagement. And we were especially considering both information-seeking and entertainment-seeking content as potential influencing factors, because these are central motives of media usage in general and customer engagement via social media in particular. And in addition, we also considered context-related factors, as I already mentioned. So especially the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, that we tried to narrow down in terms of posts that mention COVID-19 either explicitly or implicitly, and the support of a company during the COVID-19 pandemic that might be mentioned within posts as well. So we consider COVID-19 pandemic and contextual related factors, in addition to other factors, of course, that might have to do with the environment in which companies operate their business. This is our conceptual model, and you can see that we conceptualized and operationalized the customer engagement by these different facets. So we considered the number of likes, we considered the number of comments and shares, but we also considered emojis and hearts that you can find as engagement possibilities on Facebook. And we considered Facebook in our study so far. So there are positive reactions, neutral reactions, and negative reactions. And we derived several hypotheses based on the literature and the logical arguments. So we thought that information seeking might be a motive, and informative content might have an impact on customer engagement. But in addition, entertainment seeking and entertaining content should be considered as well in terms of the two most important content types that are relevant. These not necessarily need to be related to COVID-19. So we considered this context separately. So we considered COVID-19 context within the brand posts, and we considered support during Corona. So how the companies that have a brand page on Facebook support their employees, support their customers, by donations, etc., and so forth. And in addition to these direct effects, we thought, there could be interaction effects as well. So we came up with two more hypotheses that are related to the moderating effect of COVID-19 context on informative content and the support during Corona related interacting with the information content as well. How did we approach this methodologically? So we conducted a content analysis, and we coded almost up to 2,000 posts that were published in 2020 on Facebook brand pages of 16 media and technology companies. I already said a few words on the operationalization before, and we analyzed the data using a hierarchical linear regression, and we used the SPSS statistics software. And we come to the findings. So you can already see that part of our hypotheses were supported by the empirical data. We expected, or we hypothesized, positive direct influences of these four different concepts. And you can see that part of these hypotheses were supported. So entertainment as a content-related aspect was supported. And we found the direct effect of support during Corona, as well as the indirect moderation effect of support during Corona, interacting with the information content to have an impact on customer engagement. The others were not supported. Nevertheless, part of the other relationships actually had significant impacts, but instead of a positive impact, it was a negative effect. So this might be a starting point for further discussion as well. So in terms of the information content, we found that this had actually a negative significant impact. And in terms of entertainment, we've found the positive impact as assumed. So Of course, as we know from previous literature, entertainment aspects are more likely to be liked, commented on, shared, and resulting in both positive, neutral, and negative reactions. Let's come to the COVID-19 context that is especially relevant for us today. So we could not identify a significant positive impact, meaning that the customer engagement would increase. But nevertheless, part of the customer engagement variables were actually significantly affected by customer COVID-19 context. COVID-19 played a role in terms of the support. So companies who supported the community, their staff, etc., and shared about this and talked about it within their posts, they affected more likes, etc. So more customer engagement. Whereas we did not find a significant moderation effect within the interaction of information and COVID-19 context, we could actually find an impact of the moderation of support during Corona and informative content. So also, although informative content is support during Corona actually was. Yes, let's come to the conclusions. So we considered and examined both direct and indirect effects in a service-oriented media and technology environment. In addition to content-related factors, we also considered contextual factors, and we highlighted the COVID-19 pandemic, identified that there were both direct and indirect effects of these contextual factors. And based on these results, we can derive some guidelines that might be interesting and relevant for the media industry as well, because they might use it as knowledge to improve their social media strategies within a pandemic. Of course, there are some limitations. I won't go into detail of these. Only I would like to highlight that we could consider other social network sites such as Instagram in addition to Facebook. Of course, we could use a much larger number of brand pages on social network sites as well. But nevertheless, we had a reasonable number of examined brand posts already, and we could find some significant effects here as well. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to discuss this later on, I guess.
Yeah, thank you very much, Reinhard. A very great study. Okay, so I think while Tino will check his emails again, maybe we can start with one first question. So because I have one, and I have one for Elena and Reinhard. So Elena told us that there are and will be more and more complex revenue models in the media industry. And just some minutes ago, Reinhard presented results showing us that there is a change in customer engagement in these times. So I was wondering if you see impacts on this change in customer engagement for the media revenue models working in the media industry. Reinhard, what do you think? So customer engagement really have impacts on which kind of revenue model will work. So do you think there are implications between these two topics? So customer engagement and the, let's say, more or less successful revenue models.
Yeah, let me briefly think about it. It's not my answer would not be based on this actual study, but nevertheless, I see the increasing importance of social network sites and engaging with the community, and I'm convinced that in the future, and even nowadays, of course, in order to create value and capture value, it's definitely important to include the customers based on social network engagement, of course, and it might even result in increasing revenues in other areas as well. So if the customers are engaged and can rely on the brands because they communicate via social media in terms of pandemic, it might have positive effects for the hopefully soon coming normal times as well, because the customers might remember how the companies interacted with them, what they did to support others within this difficult times, and it might be an anchor in the heads of the customers that might result in future revenues as well.
Yeah. Elena, what do you think?
If I may,
Thank you.
if I may continue, I thank Reinhard for the brilliant research and very interesting presentation. And I think that when we think of the feedback from the audience, this customer engagement, which might be a slightly different thing than audience engagement, because we are missing the idea of brand. But anyway, this might be a kind of potential for the crowdfunding revenue stream, because crowdfunding is the way which needs a lot of engagement in particular project. And I think that customer engagement is extremely important for ecosystems, or for kind of digital ecosystems which are created, for example, not by media companies, but also by big techno companies. For instance, in my country, the largest and more promising ecosystem is created by the largest state banking service, Sber, and they are actively buying streaming services. They are actively buying information services, and by creating this kind of universe for these services. And of course, this brand loyalty and customer engagement in this case plays a great role.
Yeah. Thank you. So interesting, very interesting topic. And now I know that the presentation is ready to share. Terry, it's your stage.
Yes, let me share the screen for you. Okay. So.
Okay.
This is your presentation, right? Can you all see it?
That's the presentation. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Now, if we just go to the next slide. What I want to talk about today is the way in which I think COVID-19 has significantly changed the agenda around the creative economy and the creative industries. And in particular, what I want to suggest to you is that one of the big impacts of COVID has been the rapid rise of the digital sectors and the crisis of the creative sectors. And I think this has generated an imbalance that could well have longer term costs for the development of what we could call a digital creative economy. But if we think first of all about the impact of digital technologies on creative industries around the world, obviously the many transformations to the production and distribution of digital content, of which I think three are particularly worth noting: the emergence of the new digital-only industries and providers, the extent to which digital platforms operate as the amplifiers of digital content and of traditional media content. A good example of that is the relationship between Twitter and television, for instance, or Twitter and journalism, and the extent to which platforms have become competitors to traditional media and creative industries, which I will say more about. Next slide. And UNCTAD, in its creative economy report, noted that the creative and digital worlds have a long history of interacting with one another, that creative content interlaces with and gives visual life to the digital world. And I think this continues to be the case now, as it has long been. And their report identifies a series of opportunities for the creative sectors around big data, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, blockchain, and so on. Next slide. Okay, and these include the ways in which artificial intelligence is changing value chains for creative content from start to finish, with both positive and negative impacts. Obviously, questions of disinformation, filter bubbles, deep fakes also rise, but also the very interesting extent to which data and algorithmic sorting are transforming the sort of programming that we find available to us. And this is particularly the case if we think about something like the Netflix algorithm and the way in which the Netflix algorithm identifies content that it anticipates would be suitable to us in the ways in which that were pioneered by Amazon with retailing, that augmented and virtual reality can transform storytelling in the ways that content is experienced, but business incentives may not fully align here with individual well-being. The creative economy and the platform economy are converging, but this is posing difficult governance issues, and in particular, many of those around where digital advertising revenues are going and the general lack of accountability of the platforms for the marketplaces where they dominate digital advertising. And possibly the least developed of these is blockchain, that it holds considerable promise for the creative economy, but requires further development. There are important IP implications potentially of blockchain and the capacity for disintermediation that many have talked about. Next slide. At the same time, we have to acknowledge a history of suspicion and mutual incomprehension between these sectors, that many in the arts would see the digital sectors as the enemy and see the world in terms of a polarization or a binary divide between, if you like, the arts and humanities on the one side and science and technology of the other. Creative industries have long had a history of engaging with the digital sector primarily around questions of copyright infringement. On the digital side, the tendency to see content as free and not requiring nurturing or attribution is there. The extent to which these companies have historically thought of themselves as tech companies, or as the head of UK public policy at Google put it, a consumer-facing engineering company rather than a creative company. Mark Zuckerberg emphasized to the US Congress that Facebook was a tech company, not a media company. And Campbell Brown, again from Facebook, in meeting the news industry representatives in Australia, made the point, we are not here to save you. Next slide. Okay, so there's a series of digital drivers of change going on, but there's also counter tendencies. And I imagine as we go into 2021 and beyond, we will see some of this. We'll see the demand for authentic experiences in the digital world, what has been referred to as the Glastonbury effect after the popular UK festival, that people want to be seen at events in order to have a kind of communal experience. We wait to see if that returns in 2021. Noting also that the internet is now increasingly visual. In Australia, the Digital Platforms Inquiry released by the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission made some very important findings with regards to trends in advertising, noting that digital advertising is now 50% of all Australian advertising, that from about 10% 10 years ago, And within that, Google and Facebook account for 80% of Australian digital advertising. And the ACCC drew attention, among other things, to the difficulties experienced in tracking information related to that, since there is very little capacity for third-party verification of claims. Next slide. Some of the sectors, I want to now turn particularly to the impact of the pandemic. And in Australia, I think the impact of the pandemic has been paradoxical. Australia has been among the countries less affected by the COVID pandemic, although it has had very serious lockdown strategies applied, differentiated on a state-by-state basis. So what we've seen is we've seen a general rapid growth in entertainment to the home. So we can see here, this is from PricewaterhouseCoopers Entertainment and Media Outlook, that the growth trends in subscription video on demand are accelerating very quickly, that it's moved from being worth about 500 million in 2016 to 1,500 million in 2020, and the high growth trajectory there sees it being worth as much as 4 billion by 2025, and about 70% of Australian homes now access some or other form of subscription video on demand service. Next slide. We've had rapid growth also in the interactive games sector, and we could break this up into some subcategories within games, such as esports and online gambling, which have grown rapidly over this period, but again, quite an acceleration in growth in interactive games and esports. Next slide. At the same time, we see broadcasting in transition. That I think one of the important things to note is that when we talk about the digital economy, we're not just talking about the born digital companies, but the extent to which traditional media and creative industries have themselves become digitized. And you can see here the slow decline of the linear television market, but this doesn't necessarily mean the collapse of conventional broadcasters, since there is a significant growth in the broadcast video on demand market. And there's something of a segmentation or a bifurcation going on within the traditional broadcasters, and these include the public service broadcasters, around the degree to which they are providers of traditional broadcasting services, but also linear broadcasting services, but also increasingly their entertainment is driven by their platform-based activity. And I think we're still at a stage of understanding what this bifurcation of traditional broadcasting and public service broadcasting means in terms of their content. But it is fair to say that the public service broadcasters increasingly view their world as not just one where they coexist with the commercial broadcasters, but where they coexist with the platform-based subscription video on demand services. Next slide. To indicate a sector that's been particularly hard hit by COVID, this is music, and you can see there a very sharp decline in the music market 2019 to 2020, and an especially sharp decline in live music. So as with all performance-based sectors, they were very hard hit by the impact of COVID. Next slide. Okay, drawing on the OECD's study of COVID in the culture and creative sectors, that creative industries were among those most affected by COVID-19, along with tourism and travel. And the whole set of challenges associated with social distancing have been critical here. The likely downsizing of the creative sectors in the absence of public support. In the early stage of the COVID pandemic in Australia, the JobKeeper scheme proved to be an effective, if very expensive way of keeping people notionally in work, or at least getting paid in periods where the organisations they worked for had virtually ceased to operate. But over time, that's been phased out. And what it's revealed is the considerable structural fragility of these sectors and their dependence upon a floating population of individuals, non-profits and small firms. many of whom found it hard to access schemes such as JobKeeper because they're not traditional workers. They're not on the payroll on a regular basis. Next slide. There have been some positive responses. So the turn to digital distribution of content has been a pervasive feature. Creative sectors producing a home-based product or service have done well, streaming media, games, social media. There have been some crossovers identified with health and education. So there's been growing attention to the importance of the arts for mental well-being. There's been a geographical shift in Australia that I think is at its early stages, but a turn from major cities to smaller cities and regions, which may be good for addressing one of the challenges of the creative sectors of being their tendency to overly concentrate in the major metropolitan centres. And we may see, and we are seeing actually, a significant growth in the regional creative sectors. Next slide. You can see here from this study by BOP Consulting, the ways in which different creative industries have had different types of impact. So in Australia, it's been a boom time for film and television production. And this has been in part because of the difficulties of shooting in the US, saw a large number of productions relocate to Australia. And we sometimes talk about Aussiewood, where productions that are essentially US content are being shot in regions of Australia. So Netflix's Young Rock, about the early life of Dwayne Johnson, was designed to make the Gold Coast, Brisbane areas look like Hawaii. There's a bit of this sort of production going on. So different sectors have the different capacities to work from home and to adapt to physical distancing. But we can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide the extent to which COVID has had a major impact on the performance industries and the heritage industries, and a generally negative impact on the visual arts sectors. Next slide. So just thinking about some of the issues of concern, I think we've been in a transition that, whereas in the late 2010s, we were talking about the dynamism of the creative economy and the creative industries. And one example would be the manner in which the UK identified a creative industries sector deal, where it positioned the creative industries as one of the core pillar industries of the UK economy. And we had similar developments in China, for instance. Creative industries were identified as a pillar industry. But I think there's been a dissipation of energies here as the sectors are increasingly understood around the creative arts, and this has increasingly become an agenda of survival. And I think one of the areas where the most lasting impacts may be experienced is in higher education, where there have been moves, and certainly this occurred in Australia, to defund the creative arts and the humanities in order to shift student demand towards the science and technology sectors. This sense in which the digital economy and digital economy strategies are disconnected from creative industries and creative economy strategies, a loss of policy focus on the creative industries, so a degree of fragmentation of the arts and digital sectors. And finally, of course, the recurring issue of economic polarization, that there's no question that many of the big winners of COVID-19 have been the largest tech companies, which experienced enormous growth in their revenue base over 2020, 21, and the extent to which this accelerates platform power that is economic, political, and communicative in its nature, and creates a greater degree of dependency of the creative sectors on these tech giants. And my argument here would be that I think it's timely to look at some degree of policy rebalancing to empower the creative sectors in their dealings with the digital tech giants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry, and thank you, Tino, for sharing the slides. And now we have some time left for questions and discussion. Are there questions in the audience?
And I will go back to the backstage, and we can invite Toshiya and Elena back to the front.
Yes, great. Thank you. So I was just looking to the chat and to the, yeah, there might be some questions. So there's one from Castellus. The question is, will the pandemic lead to increased globalization of media content, or rather to more insular national media systems? So will it get more and more globalized media, or more a national one? Question 2, Terry.
Okay, well, I think it's a multifaceted question. I think the tendency, the globalization trends were slowing before COVID. That's the first observation, and you can look at publications like The Economist, Harvard Business Review were tracking this. They were talking about what was called slowbalization, and the extent to which populist politics saw a reassertion of nationalism. But what COVID has exposed is firstly the vulnerability, which in a sense was always there, but we haven't been thinking about it as much, and also the significantly reduced movement of people around the world, which I think will be a continuing feature for some time to come. At the same time, from my vantage point here in Australia, Australia has become this very significant outlet for Hollywood production. Okay, now when we talk about Hollywood production, the term is somewhat deceptive in that, as people who know the US screen industries would know, production happens all over the country, and cities such as Atlanta are as increasingly as important as Los Angeles as sites of production. But there has been a significant movement. I think what we'd be talking about here would be what I might call the Netflix effect. But I'm referring to streaming services more generally, and clearly streaming services carry less local content than their linear forebears. In Australia, linear commercial broadcasting has been subject to Australian content rules. Now, one thing I'd say is that drama has largely disappeared from that local content in Australia is increasingly reality television of some or other form. But from the perspective of the drama industries, they're increasingly now dealing directly with companies such as Netflix, and less are they dealing with the linear broadcasters. The implications of that, I think, we're at an early stage of seeking to comprehend. But I would like to hear other speakers on that question.
Yeah, so Elena, what's your opinion on that? No, obviously. Can you hear us, Elena?
May I
yeah.
join?
Yes, of course.
I
yeah.
have troubles with my sound, so I didn't hear what Uwe was talking. But Russia is a good example of combination between the global and the national. And I would agree with Terry, Professor Flew, that Netflix effect is a tremendous effect for the content market in Russia. Also Disney Plus, also Hollywood production, they are still growing. But on the other side, the production of national serials, of national drama is also growing, because this is a question of style, taste, and also attitudes, because the American realities still American realities and Russian realities are different, and people want to, especially the entertainment market, people want to follow the kind of national constructs in terms of entertainment and culture. We see a tremendous rise in production through mobile telephones of kind of internet serials during pandemic times. So we had a kind of serials like we have today, with these smaller screens produced by Russian entertainment production companies from distant during the pandemic, the first pandemic wave. This also renewed an interest of the public of the audience to the national drama. And I think that it would be still a combination for countries with stable content production and with stable entertainment production like Russia.
Yeah, thank you. And Professor Jitsuzumi, what's the Japanese perspective on that?
Well, as for the globalization or the localization of the contents, I think the Japanese situation is a little different from the other countries because many Japanese people cannot fluently understand the English language. So the most popular dramas or the movies are transcribed in English, so that in order to introduce foreign content into Japanese local market, the content operator or content platform had to translate the language into Japanese local language. Otherwise, they cannot get the shares. But the situation is a little different from Russia. Most of the Japanese content market is on the terrestrial TVs, as I mentioned, and those commercial content creation is based on the commercial revenues of the terrestrial TVs. However, due to the economic downturn of the COVID-19, that the consumption activity in Japan is at the bottom, so that the company do not willing to spend a lot of money on the commercial message on the TV. So the quality of the TV content is at the bottom right now, so that comparatively the foreign contents such as drama created in Korean or the drama created in other countries may have some comparative advantage compared to the local language Japanese dramas. So that these days that the Netflix and other Amazon Prime introduce a lot of foreign dramas translated into Japanese languages and distributed via their terrestrial TVs. They bought some programs or spaces from the conventional TV businesses and distributed their own contents. So that in that sense that there's some progress of the globalization of content in Japanese market, but not much compared to the other countries due to the reason of the language barriers of the main Japanese people. That's my observation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think let's have some minutes left to maybe one last question to all of you. So IMMAA is always covering the topic of how to teach our media and media management students. And during the last 1.5 years, our students weren't present at our universities. They haven't had access to the TV studios, to the audio production studios, to all the facility at our universities. Most of them are at home studying from their own room, from their home, and from their desktop. So and Terry just told us that there is a shift in higher education away from creative things and arts to pure technical contents and sectors. So how did you at your universities manage this challenge to keep your media students creative in these times? Maybe we can start with Reinhard.
Yeah, thank you, Uwe, for this question. From my perspective, it went all much more smoothly than we might have expected in the beginning. There were some challenges, of course, but we very soon changed to Zoom and other platforms, and it was a challenge to keep in touch with the students, but nevertheless it worked out in the end. And What we did a lot, we worked with Zoom. We created these breakout sessions, and we gave the students room to get to know each other, because most of them, they even didn't know each other from real life. We gave them questions that they should work on and try to find answers for these questions as well. And my observation was that the students were really active and came up with their own social network environments that they used in order to interact with each other and to be creative and come up with some solutions. I think, and I would expect that returning to kind of normal life, some of these digital technologies that we used and the students used will remain and will be used in the future as well. So this is one of my observations at the moment.
Thank you. That was kind of the same situation here at our university. Terry, what's your opinion on that? What about creativity in these times and in teaching?
Yeah, there'd be four observations I'd make on that. The first is that open learning and distance education have a long history in Australia. There have been there's been some form of university degrees delivered through distance education for about 100 years in Australia, what we used to call correspondence courses. And Open Learning Australia, modelled on the UK Open University, has operated since the early 1990s. So the back and forth about in-person versus online teaching has gone on in Australia. Some universities positioned to be online, some universities didn't. And then suddenly in 2020, everyone had to go online. And the fact is everyone did in some or other capacity. As Reinhard observed, there was certainly quite a degree of adaptiveness. Probably the bigger change in Australia arose from the fact that Australia has one of the most internationalised university systems in the world, by which I mean that international students account for, on average, 25% of all enrolments in Australian universities. And universities, because international students pay fees, and for the most part, domestic students don't, there's long been a very significant financial incentive to recruit large numbers of international students in the Australian sector. Now, that dried up, okay? But its impact was very uneven between the universities. For, I guess, the most prestigious universities, international students, and I'm thinking here particularly students from China, who are the largest number of international students, were prepared to study with those programs online. Many other universities experienced a sharp drop-off in their Chinese student demand. I think there may also be issues around the Australia-China, increasingly fraught Australia-China diplomatic relationship that are relevant there. For other markets such as India, India collapsed. Students from India were not prepared to do online courses. And so much of the sector has experienced sharp downturns. For the longer term, I think what it's indicating is that so I think for the universities, the issue is in 2022, even if the pandemic eases off, they can't return to the models of 2019. There's been a change in student expectations around the delivery of content. And what is likely to emerge is some form of blended learning. The issue is no one can quite agree on what the blend will be. So in many universities, the traditional lecture is being replaced by video, and face-to-face is looked as more a seminar type arrangement. Others are going into fully online, particularly in the postgraduate market. Although, interestingly, international students have a very strong preference for in-country and face-to-face. So I think that the mix of things that's going on is highly variable. But I think we will come to a higher education landscape in the 2020s where a lot of the things that we've taken for granted about how you deliver a course are now very much up for grabs. And they're up for grabs in part because our students will expect a greater degree of diversity and flexibility around content delivery.
The purpose of the university learning is twofold. One is to learn something new, and the other is to make some network which may last for the rest of their lives. And the very first half, it can be done easily, comparatively easily online. We have a lot of system for distance learning, and some prestigious universities in the United States offer free online courses over the MOOC, and the Japan universities has a similar systems to offer the courses online. So that it's kind of piece of cake to make the learning move from the physical classroom to the virtual classroom. It's not difficult, but the problem, the challenge is that how to motivate, how to enable the students to build up their own network, which may last for the rest of their life. So that it's a challenge, and I do not have a clear answer right now. But we have to understand this is just the second year of the pandemic, so we are still in the learning stage, and I cannot give the student that this is the right answer. This is how you should create a network right now. But we have to learn with the student and their parents how to build the network online, and which can behave as what we have created before the pandemic era. So that sorry, I don't have any answer right now. So that's my observation.
Thank you. So I hope the audience could hear what you said, because again, obviously I have some technical problems. Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for your presentations, for your comments, and now I will welcome back customers to the stage. As far as I know, I have to leave. That you can join us. So thank you very much to all of you. Have a great weekend, and now it's on our president to close the session. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed the presentations. I think they gave, again, a very diverse perspective on what happens in the different countries. In any case, if you had issues to follow yesterday's session or today's session, we recorded the individual presentations and we will make them available on the IMMAA website. So it remains for me to say thank you to all who joined the topical forum, and stay safe, stay happy. Hope to see you soon again on one or the other occasion in media management and economics, or on our planned conference next year that will hopefully take place in physical presence. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.